But welcome to our August PAC event. My name is Jocelyn Yadian. I'm one of the project managers here at the Dog Aging Project, and I'm stationed out of Texas A&M. Today's event, as you can tell, is a little different. We're on Zoom compared to our YouTube Live. With that being said, let's get into today's event. So, like I said, we have a few people with us behind the scenes. We have Susan and Addison monitoring the chat box to get those questions going and admitting people. So if you're in the waiting room, we're going to get you in there slowly but surely. And we have three presenters today. Our first one is Harmony Deers. She's our study participant manager, and today she'll provide an update about the Dog Aging Project's funding resources. So Harmony, come on back, and whenever you're ready, take it away. Let me see, do you have access? Let me get you back on.
There we go. I just got access. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Jocelyn, and thanks to everyone who is joining us here today. We're excited to be with you again and share some very exciting information. And I'm here today to discuss an update on our funding. You all have stuck with us and supported us as we have focused our efforts heavily on our new funding frontier this year. We are happy to share that we have resubmitted our grant proposal with the National Institute of Aging and have high expectations as we look ahead to hearing back on those results in the spring of next year. And as we've worked through this process of seeking another governmental grant, it's allowed our team to think more broadly about funding sources and the importance of ensuring the future of the Dog Aging Project. As many of you might know, our Dog Aging Project founders have created a separate nonprofit 501c3 organization called the Dog Aging Institute. And the Institute's mission is to support the scientific initiatives of the Dog Aging Project and other research studies focused on companion canine health. So to ensure funding continues to be robust and long-term, we are pursuing diverse funding sources, including additional grants from the NIH, as well as individual, philanthropic, nonprofit foundations, and corporate support. So in the future, you may see acknowledgments made on behalf of the Dog Aging Project to corporate entities or philanthropic groups for funding to help support our science. Federally funded research is often just the first step of scientific discoveries that improve lives, both human and companion canine and beyond. From there, corporations will use those findings to develop new products such as food, vaccines, diagnostic tests, medications, etc., that humans and their companions can benefit from in the real world. And while the Dog Aging Project may receive corporate support for our basic research, please rest assured that the corporation will not control the findings of our research or how we publish those findings, nor will participant-specific private data be shared outside of the Dog Aging Project team. The same rules apply to philanthropic groups. These groups will not determine how we perform our research. They will not have access to private data. Our commitment to protecting our participants' private personal information will always remain a top priority at the Dog Aging Project. And our team believes in keeping our participants up to speed on the process and progress and growth because we're all experiencing these things together. After all, you and your companion are the heart of our mission. So please rest assured that we will decide which sources of funding support to accept with the highest ethics and responsibility. And we appreciate you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Harmony, for the update. Now we're going to jump into our PAC event with our next presenter, which is Mandy Kaufman. Mandy Kaufman is our data manager, and she's going to explain how Dog Aging Project data is curated and what outside researchers agree to when we get our data. Now, bear with me. I have to share the screen to get her slides. And then, Susan, will you please give Mandy some video and audio access? And then slideshow. Hopefully everyone can see the slides.
Excellent. Looks like we're in business here. Hi, everyone. As Jocelyn mentioned, my name is Mandy Kaufman. I am the data manager for the Dog Aging Project. So I work pretty closely with internal team members of the Dog Aging Project to fulfill their data needs, as well as preparing our data for dissemination to other users, which is what I'm here to talk with you about today. So as many of you are aware, but as maybe a reminder, the Dog Aging Project is an open data project. So this means that we will make our data available to researchers outside of the Dog Aging Project in hopes that those data users will also use the data we have collected to make additional discoveries and further scientific understanding about dogs and aging. The way that we disseminate that data are through what we call the curated data releases. There are a number of different groups who are eligible for access to these curated data releases. So DAP team members, those of us actually working on the project, obviously will have access to the curated data. DAP collaborators, so these may be people who are working closely with a DAP team member on something that DAP already has in mind for a research goal, or someone who has proposed to work alongside DAP researchers on a new research goal, and external researchers. So that might be many of you, faculty members at other institutions, students, members of nonprofits, members of the general public who just have an interest in the project are all eligible for applying for access to the curated data. Next slide, please. So what am I talking about when I refer to the curated data? These are standardized data sets that we share via something called the Terra Cloud Platform. These data sets, as of the latest releases, have over 50 million data points. We have tirelessly QA/QC'd, cleaned, made sure to remove any personally identifying information about dog owners. We have calculated a number of useful variables, including the date of birth, date of death for some of these dogs. We have included some secondary environmental data associated with these dogs. We have also produced a pretty large suite of detailed documentation to go along with these data sets to aid in their use. So this whole package of the curated data sets, along with the documentation, should hopefully allow for easily repeatable analyses if someone was interested in pursuing something that they had already seen research about. Next slide, please. So when do these data releases happen? We release curated data once per year. Internal data users, so those would be DAP team members and collaborators working closely with somebody on the DAP team, will receive access to more recent data. So this year, we released for internal data users the 2023 curated data release. That contains data collected through the end of December 2023. That data was made available to DAP team members and collaborators as of March 1st of this year. After approximately a 1-year lag, we make those same data sets available to open access data users. Like I said, this is generally the same data. We may have found some corrections to make along the way as our internal users worked with that data over the past year. And these data are also available to approved open access users that have signed a current data use agreement. So the most recent curated data workspace available to the open access data users is the 2022 curated data release, which contains data collected through the end of December 2022. We released that workspace in April of this year. And for those of you who are a little bit more familiar with the surveys, perhaps you have filled some of these out yourself. This workspace contains responses to the health and life experience survey. So those are all of those questions that you answered for your dog to become a member of the DAP Pack in the first place. It also contains responses to the annual follow-up survey. So that is basically that same set of questions that you answered during the health and life experience survey. We ask those questions again every year. This workspace also contains responses to the Canine Social and Learned Behavior Survey, the End of Life Survey, and also some environment and genetic data sets. So there's a lot in there. Next slide, please. So how does somebody go about gaining access to these data sets? Everybody, so DAP team members, collaborators, and open access data users all need to have an application for data access on file and sign a current data use agreement. No matter who you are, the way that you start that process is the same. So you will visit our website and fill out an application for data access. Once you've done that, we will send you a data use agreement to sign. Once that data use agreement has been fully executed, you'll receive instructions for how you can access the data in the Terra platform. And then every year after that, when we release an updated curated data release, we will let you know that it's ready, ask you to give us a little update about what you've been working on with the data, and see if you'd like to renew your access to the new data set. So following this process not only allows us to keep track of how many users we have of our data sets and what products they might be producing, which we love to know about, it also makes sure that we are having users understand the importance of our core values and the DAP team contributions are acknowledged in any of this work that's being done. Next slide, please. So just a little overview about what is contained in that data use agreement that I keep referring to. There are some things that we do want folks to be doing and some things that we don't want folks to be doing. So when you sign a data use agreement, you are agreeing that you understand we do want you to use the DAP curated data for research, educational, and nonprofit purposes. We do want you to publish analyses using these DAP curated data. We want you to cite the appropriate curated data release when doing that. And we want to make sure that any individuals who are working with the DAP data have signed a data use agreement. Things that we do not want folks to be doing and that you are agreeing not to do when you sign a data use agreement include things like attempting to identify or contact any of the study participants, attempting to access or use the participant locations for any reason. Okay. We do not want you to share DAP data with other users, even if they are members of your own organization or group, because they need to sign their own data use agreement to gain access to the data. You also agree that you will not be using DAP data for corporate or for-profit purposes and will not misrepresent the DAP data. Next slide, please. So just in case anyone is curious about the numbers of data users that we have had to date, as of earlier this week, we have had over 280 open access data users. We are on our third open access data release. So those 280 users have had access to at least one of those data releases. The most recent open access data release has about 75 data users right now. We are on our fourth internal data release. We've had over 120 total data users internally. And with access to our current most recent internal curated data, we've got about 75 data users there as well. So this gets us excited to see how many people are interested in and working with these data. Next slide. So this slide just contains some helpful links that you all might want to refer to. So the DAP website, if you are interested in learning more about the DAP Open Data Initiative, you can follow the second link. And then if you're interested in applying for data access or taking a look at some of those documentation resources I mentioned that go along with the curated data, those links are there for you as well. And that is all I have. Jocelyn, I will pass it back to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Hopefully everyone feels like they know about our data and understand what our public data is. But next up is Dr. Virginia Fate will now help explain how to use our data in research and publications. Virginia is our clinical professor at the Department of Veterinary Physiology and pharmacology, at Texas A&M. And on the dog aging project, she's our chair on the Publications Committee and the Ancillary Studies Committee. And she tracks the publications of the project and monitors their impact. And today, she will talk about how science builds on science and the importance of diverse analysis of data from the dog aging project. So welcome, Virginia. And when you're ready, take it away.
Thanks, Jocelyn. Hi, everyone. I don't have any slides. I just thought I'd talk for a little bit, and I'm happy to answer questions at the end, as is Mandy, I'm sure. So as I was thinking about what I wanted to share with you guys, including some of the publications that have come from internal DAP researchers, I wanted to pull back a little bit and think about scientific knowledge. And one of the ways that you can think about scientific knowledge that might be helpful as you think about the novel and innovative research that's happening in the Dog Aging Project is scientific knowledge is often considered to have core and then research frontier aspects to it. And so the core is the facts that we all agree on, the two laws of thermodynamics, for example, that are core knowledge that everybody, all physicists agree on, and they're accepted by the scientific community. And then there's the research frontier, and that's the work that's being done right now by researchers currently. And this is exactly where the Dog Aging Project is at. We are on the frontier of learning about aging in dogs, and analyzing lots of different kinds of data. And this is where new knowledge comes from. And it often feels a little bit messy. The scientific process is iterative. We do things over and over again in slightly different ways to interrogate, to assess, to evaluate, to determine what the facts are. And that means that the way we understand the world, and for example, the world of aging in dogs, is always going to change as we get new information and we have new investigations and new investigators. And that new knowledge doesn't actually become core, as in everybody agrees on exactly everything, until we get to a consensus and that knowledge has been firmly established. And generally that takes years to decades. Sometimes we find out new things that turn out to be not particularly important. Sometimes we find things that are really important and then stand the test of time. And in the frontier, in this investigative phase, different scientists can look at the same data and the same evidence and come to different conclusions. And so that's one of the things that we expect to happen with Dog Aging Project data and analyses as internal DAP researchers and researchers and others who use the open access data, the open data that's available on Terra. We're not all going to come to exactly the same conclusions as we're in this research frontier. And the other thing about science that's important to remember is if someone has a finding, they publish a paper, and other people try to replicate that work and they don't find the same things, then that initial work can becomes either better understood, or it may in fact be completely refuted as other investigators look at similar or the same data or similar aspects of the data. And so that's just something to keep in mind as the Dog Aging Project researchers, internal researchers, develop new knowledge, publish new papers, perform different kinds of analyses. And then, the fact that that we have data on Terra, that we have this open science project, that we share our data openly, means that although we control access more or less to the data, so people who sign data use agreements and so on, we can't control what other people find. We can't control what kind of analyses they do. We can ask them to share their data with us. We can ask them to acknowledge the Dog Aging Project for the use of the data, but people might see things different. They might perform slightly different analyses. We expect that researchers who are not involved in the day-to-day with the Dog Aging Project may have different understandings of where the data come from and how to analyze it than we do. And so we don't have the ability, nor do we have the desire to police what's being published from the open data. We encourage that, and we believe that it will the good stories and the investigations that are that build on each other over time means that the work that comes out of that will be valuable and useful. Some things to understand about how there might be differences in how people interpret the data and the different types of findings. One of the things is that this is the type of project and the type of data that we're gathering are what are called cohort studies, and it's a longitudinal study, which means we're not, for the most part, with the exception of the triad trial, we're not performing any interventions. We are just gathering data over time as dogs live with you in your homes. And so we have no control over what kinds of things happen. And there are many confounding factors with things that influence how your dog behaves and how they age and how they acquire disease and so on over time that are challenging to tease out. And so different individuals can look at those data and see slightly different things in them. So that's one of the challenges, is that the nature of what causes what can be difficult to determine in the short term in particular. Another thing to keep in mind is that while we in the Dog Aging Project publish our papers in peer-reviewed journals, that means other scientists review the work before it gets published. The peer review process is not perfect. Some of you may have read about that sort of thing, but the peer review process isn't perfect. And peer reviewers may have different understanding and different levels of expertise as they review papers that have what can be very complicated analyses. And so their expertise may be in one particular area, but there's another area of the paper that is not in their expertise. And it's only 2 or 3 people who look at each paper. It's not the entire community of scientists. And so peer review is a good process, but it's not perfect. And so just because a paper gets published doesn't mean it is the truth. And so that's something to keep in mind. Another thing I think is important to think about is looking at these data in different ways and using different types of analyses and different methods is good, because that will improve the robustness of our findings and our ability to interpret them. As long as many people look at all of these data, and as Mandy said, 50 million plus pieces of data, you can imagine that it could be challenging. Well, it would be impossible for everyone to come to exactly the same conclusion looking at those data, depending on how you slice and dice them and parse them and analyze them and visualize them and so on. And I think finally, one thing to keep in mind is that for every publication, even the publications within the research team that's on the Dog Aging Project, everyone uses a slightly different set of dogs, depending on what it is they're looking at. So I looked at a few of the papers that we've published recently, and one paper included 40,367 dogs. One paper looked at data from only 47 dogs. Another paper looked at 435 dogs, and another looked at 2,570 dogs. So because of the criteria that the researchers were using to select which dog data they wanted to look at, the numbers are all going to be different. And so if you looked at even the same analysis, but with different sets of dogs, for example, the 2022 versus the 2023 data release, there are likely to be some differences in the analysis and in the conclusions that are drawn. So Jocelyn, when she introduced me, was talking about how I chair the publications committee for the Dog Aging Project. And so part of my job is to keep track of and help manage and evaluate where we're publishing, how we're publishing, and make it easy for people to find the product of our work. And so there are a number of places you can look at what we do. One of them is we just have a list of all of our publications that's on the Dog Aging Project website. Under the research tab, you can just see a list of all of our publications. At the top of that page, you can also go to our Google Scholar page. So maybe some of you are familiar with that. Usually those are a Google Scholar page is for an individual researcher. For example, I have a Google Scholar page. If you look for me on Google Scholar, you'll find all of my publications where I'm an author. But we created it's basically a team page. So the Dog Aging Project team and our members and our consortium authored papers are all on the Google Scholar page. And the nice thing about the Google Scholar page is it's not just a listing, but it also includes our citations. So when someone publishes a paper and then someone else uses that paper to interpret their own work or analyze their own data, then they cite our papers. And you can see, therefore, how many times our Dog Aging Project papers have been cited. So we would assume over time that the work that's interesting or that is built upon in important ways will be cited more. And that also gives us a way to look at, like, what is the impact of our publication? What's the impact of our data? The other thing that we have on the Dog Aging Project site is under the blog tab, almost every paper that we've published, at least the most recent ones, we have a blog post. So those are called, that's called the scientific results section under the blog post, and you'll find a post for every paper. And so not everyone is an expert in all the areas of science, but you can go there and see kind of a layperson's or a short explanation of what was performed, what was the study about, what kind of data did they look at, what analysis did they do, and what were the conclusions. And so over time, you'll start to get a picture of the kinds of things that we're looking at. And I think that's a really good place to go. Those two pages on our public page, on the Dog Aging Project page, are a really nice place to go. And over time, you'll be able to see as we accumulate publications. We have recently published several papers, and several more are currently in review or have been submitted for review. So I anticipate by the end of the year of 2024, we'll have a handful more, maybe probably more than that, more publications as we start to roll out more and more different types of studies. As many of you know, we have a really diverse research team within the project. I'm a pharmacologist. We have veterinarians of various types who are involved, neurologists, cardiologists, internists. We have social scientists. We have aging researchers, aging biology, evolutionary biology, geneticists, and so on. So there are a lot of different angles to the project and to aging that we're investigating in a lot of different ways. And so you can follow what we're doing on those two pages. And then one more thing I'd like to talk about is as this project gains traction, has more participants like yourselves, and as we publish more papers, and sometimes we get coverage in the lay press as well, you'll start seeing posts about various things about the Dog Aging Project and potentially about the data, because as Mandy said, we have more than 100 people who have more than 200 people who have requested access to the data. So that's a lot of people looking at it. So there may be people that are making videos or posting comments on various social media platforms, and they may or may not have access to the Dog Aging Project data, first of all. They may or may not have done a formal analysis. Those analyses may or may not have been published and peer-reviewed. And so if you're curious about something that somebody posts somewhere, come back to those research pages and evaluate for yourself whether the claims that they're making are based on Dog Aging Project data, or if they are perhaps filtered through the lens of the influencer or the person who's posting on that social media platform. So it's easy in those videos. They're very short, or the posts are very short. They can say things that can be exaggerated for effect. But if you come back to the Dog Aging Project website, you will be able to see whether it makes sense, the claim that they're making, if they could even make it, and so on. And of course, you can always bring discussion points to the dog park or contact the administration if you have concerns about particular social media activity that you see that you think is not representing the project well. So Jocelyn, that's all I have.
Thank you, Virginia. What I can do really quick is talk about the pages, or share the pages you were talking about for those who are interested. Can everyone see my screen? No, hold on. Here we go. So this is the publication page that Virginia was talking about. You can go, if you go to the homepage, you go to research, hit publications. And that's how you get the list of of all our publications. And then what she also talked about right here at the top is our Dog Aging Project Google Scholar button. And then you can click on there and also see all our publications here. And then the citations that other people have been using, right? Virginia, correct me.
Yeah, that's right. So on that page right there, the cited by means someone else read that paper and then used it in either in the discussion or the methods or the interpretation of the paper that they wrote. So if you click on those little cited by, it'll list every article, every other paper that has cited that particular paper. And it's a nice way to see if people are engaging in your work. That's one way of seeing whether people are reading what you're and using the research that you're publishing.
Very cool. And then the last page is our blog. So you can go to our blog. We have lots of different segments, but the one that we like to emphasize is our scientific results that explains all our publications in a more easier way to understand, because I'm one of those. I'm not a science expert, so it helps me understand it a lot better. So go explore these pages when you get a chance. And as for questions, most of them have been general information about the DAP, which I know our team are slowly answering it through the chat box. I haven't seen anything too specific. Let me look again, double check. Yeah.
Ellen asked about non-clinical studies. I did get back to Ellen in the chat. And we have a few more to look at that we might need to answer, whether it be directly via email or through the dog park.
Yes. And then the last one I just came in, when you upload your veterinary medical records, you get to do it when you first enroll into our study and complete the health life survey. At the end, you have an option. It takes about 24 hours where you'll get that button where you can upload your records. And then if something happens to your dog, like I see here, where you're diagnosed with a new disease, you can still provide that update, but a year later. So when you do your annual follow-up survey, that's where you can upload. So save all your records for the year, and then you can upload it when you do your annual follow-up. There's been a few of those questions. And after that, I think that's it. So thank you so much, Virginia. Thank you so much, Mandy and Harmony. Thank you for everyone attending today. All the additional questions, we will reach out either through Zendesk, or that's what we call it, through email, or we'll reach out through the talk part. But we appreciate everyone being here today. Again, this event has been recorded and will be posted later on YouTube. And then we're planning, so stay tuned for a Sunday science seminar. We hope to do that probably next year. So stay tuned for that when we do it. And that's about it. So thank you. And for everyone else, have a good one.